Hello everyone. I am pretty sure that you have all been following the news and you know what's going on right now. So for this Wednesday commentary, I am not going to give you any sort of article to go through specifically. We need to talk substance today. We have an equivalent of a death penalty on the internet because we have allowed few companies to control pretty much the entire markets in their respective industries. They are able to decide who gets to live on the internet and get access to all the necessities that you can have to socialize and to exist in whatever other way on the internet. It's not just social media. It's payment processors like Visa and MasterCard or Shopify. It's platforms like Google and Apple. It's Amazon Web Services that is actually a dominant cloud service provider. And if you are not able to, have a website, and Amazon and all the other web hosting providers are refusing to give you a domain or to host your server, you're not even allowed to, exist in your own little corner of the internet, not just on the platforms themselves, but on your own website. This is unprecedented. Not just that these companies have just banned Trump or Parler or Alex Jones or anyone in the past. It's just that this situation where you have just a single company in every market dominating it, that is unprecedented, at least in the last 100 years or so. Because this is more like feudalism, where you have just a very narrow class of owners of land who are able to dictate the living conditions of everyone else. And this is exactly what's happening, because the internet and computer technology are, in the modern day and age, fundamental to sustainable living. Internet is as fundamental to surviving in the modern era as water. I mean, you don't die if you don't have internet, but it's just hardwired into every function of our society. So this is way beyond just free speech issue. This is the question of, are we allowed to even exist? Because we are social animals, we need to socialize, and we developed internet to communicate and connect with other people. And if you're not allowed to utilize the internet technologies to the full extent, then you're not allowed to fulfill one of your basic biological functions, and that is to socialize. We need to be able to socialize on the internet, especially in the days of the COVID-19 restrictions and lockdowns, where everybody is confined within their homes, and a lot of people are just, single person households, and they have nowhere else to go. They don't have people to meet, so they can only socialize on the internet. This is fundamentally destructive to our modern day of life. To have a few companies being able to decide who gets to access the internet. In the news, it has been overblown that Trump has been banned from Facebook or Twitter. Trump's Twitter account has been banned and he's no longer allowed to tweet. So because he was organizing some sort of insurrection and he was inciting violence, he was breaking the terms and conditions of Twitter. This is way beyond Twitter. Let me give you a quick rundown of how many companies actually banned Trump and Trump-related people from their platforms. So Reddit has banned the subreddit group r Donald Trump, and also I think they have banned, what was the name? The Donald? I think it was just the Donald subreddit, the Donald, but that was in the past. They banned the subreddit r Donald Trump right now. Twitch has disabled Trump's channel, citing the move as a necessary step to protect its community and prevent Twitch from being used to incite further violence. Shopify took down 2 online stores affiliated with Trump, his organization, and his campaign's merchandise sites for violating its policies on supporting violence. Okay, that one is extremely scary to me, because Shopify, this is not like a social media platform. This is a place where when you have a store and you're trying to sell things and you need to process, payment information, credit cards, debit cards, whatever. You're using Shopify just as a medium to process those payments, to process all of those transactions, and it's really apolitical. It should be apolitical. It's just you're processing transactions of whoever. If it's legal, it should be fine, right? Because you are selling legal stuff. So what's the problem? I would understand totally that Shopify wouldn't want to mediate transactions that are for illegal goods or services or whatever, right? Or if they would be mediating transactions between countries that have some sort of sanctions, economic sanctions, like Iran, like I can understand that, that's fine. But why ban somebody's merchandise store? If that merch is actually illegal, like it's copyrighted or it's promoting some sort of illegal activities, I get it. But just a merch that says MAGA or something, or it's in the colors of Trump's campaign or whatever, is that on its own inciting violence just because you support Trump? Is that on its own inciting violence? Is that the message that they're trying to send here? Twitter, of course, announced Friday the platform will permanently ban President Trump's account effective immediately. Permanently. So he will never be able to tweet on Twitter. A presidential candidate. Google has pulled Parler, a social media app for conservatives and far-right extremists. Okay, what has Parler to do with Trump? Well, there's a lot of Trump supporters, right? So what is the message that Google is sending? The message is, okay, maybe Parler has been used to incite violence. Like not the Parler as an app itself, but like people that use Parler have been disseminating messages that were inciting violence. I'm sure that happened. And you know what? The reason I'm sure that there were people that were inciting violence? Because these people are everywhere. These people are on Twitter. These people are on Facebook. People that do illegal stuff are everywhere. They are everywhere. It's always going to be the case that whenever you're trying to do something, you can have whatever benign intentions, it doesn't matter. As soon as you invite people, as soon as you invite users to generate content, there is always going to be some percentage of that content that is going to be abhorrent. So this is not an issue of Parler. This is the issue of those users. So I'm okay if you go after those users, if you ban those specific users, if they break your terms of service, if they break the law, or if they engage in some sort of illicit activities, I can understand that. But is Parler advertised as a platform to incite violence? Hey, come in here and you can organize your next insurrection for free. Is this what Parler is about? Because you see, my point here is that people that incite violence exist on Twitter, but Twitter, which offers its app on Google Play Store, bans those users that incite violence, and Twitter is still allowed to be available on Google Play Store so that Android users can download Twitter and just install it on their phones and use it as any other app. But Parler is different. Why? What's the message here? YouTube is accelerating its enforcement of election misinformation and voter fraud claims against Trump and other channels. This is something that is actually scaring me. Because I have made the video on online elections, and that video had nothing to do with Trump or elections, whatever. I made no political comments there. It was just purely educational video about the tech and security of online election systems. It was just a cybersecurity educational video. Quite long. I spent a lot of time with it. I did a lot of research. I think I had like 80 pages of research. I have a lot of footnotes for that video. It was like 20-minute long. It was heavily edited. I did try to make that video as useful as possible. When I first released that video, it was monetized for the first time. By the algorithm, it was monetized. But then, out of nowhere, there was a manual review. And manual review means there is a person at YouTube that decides to change or approve algorithmic decision. The algorithmic decision was to let this video go. It was free to be monetized. The manual review demonetized that video, and it shadow banned it, because now YouTube tells you actually why, well, sort of why the video was demonetized. So sort of that video was demonetized because it was engaging in a commentary of important social issues, and you're not supposed to do that on YouTube anymore. And also that video was age restricted for no reason at all, because age restriction happens in content that requires users to log in and confirm they are over 18 years old. And it's a content that is supposed to be like super violent, showing gore or graphic or sexual content. None of that is in my video. So like a week later, I re-uploaded that video. Again, algorithmically it was confirmed for full monetization, but then after a couple thousand views, again, manual review, demonetization, but this time there was no age restriction. So somebody at YouTube decided for the first time to, age restrict my video to have it so that it has less views. But then another person at YouTube, I suppose, did not age restrict that video, but it was still shadow banned. And that video has only like 7,000 views, despite the fact that I have almost 300,000 subscribers now, and most of my videos get like 20,000 views within the first 1 or 2 days. So this is strange, right? Because my YouTube channel, it's very hard to maintain. I'm really working hard on those videos. I'm really pushing the research so that all the information is fact-checked. I sometimes get things wrong. I try to correct it when that happens, but it's a lot of research that goes into these videos. It's a lot of editing. They're mostly educational. And I release like one video every week, one video every 2 weeks or 3 weeks. It takes a lot of time to make these videos. But YouTube is sending a message here that they are no longer tolerate independent creators making these kinds of videos. You can make these videos if you are, an authoritative source, whatever that means. But you cannot make videos if you are an independent analyst, if you are an independent educator, if you're trying to teach people new things. This is something that's haunting me, because it's making it extremely more difficult, increasingly more difficult, I should say, for me to maintain this work. Monetization of my channel is abysmal. It hasn't moved in the last 2-3 years since I got my first YouTube check. It's always the same every month. It's not going up, even though my views are sometimes going up, sometimes they don't. They usually fluctuate around 500,000 views a month. But that's despite the fact that a lot of people are subscribing to my channel, but most of those subscribers are not viewing my videos. They are not even seeing the notifications, and I know that because YouTube is actually disclosing this in the analytics. So I know that YouTube is not promoting my videos to my own subscribers. So what's the point of even having those subscribers? Okay, that's a YouTube brand. But let's continue. Facebook banned Donald Trump from posting on his Facebook accounts for at least until the next 2 weeks, until the transition of power to President-elect Joe Biden is complete. Okay, so this is a more of a reasonable ban, I would say. It's not permanent. It's just for that period of time, that they think could be, violent or whatever. Instagram, which is also owned by Facebook, banned Donald Trump from posting on his Facebook accounts for the same period of time. So, same thing. Snapchat disabled Trump's Snapchat account Wednesday because it believes the account promotes and spreads hate and incites violence. Right? So, my next point here, well, the same point that I mentioned about Twitter. Snapchat, again, offered on Google Play Store, no problem, despite the fact that a lot of Snapchat activity is illegal, not just because of inciting violence and hate, but because of, all of that illegal video content and image content of minors. And Snapchat is still being allowed, even though we perfectly know that it's being used for that. And Facebook and Instagram are being used for that as well. TikTok. Why are these platforms still allowed on Google Play Store, but Parler has been banned? Right? TikTok is removing content violations and redirecting hashtags like #StormTheCapitol and #PatriotParty to its community guidelines. Apple suspended Parler from its App Store Friday after threatening to remove right-wing friendly social media app Parler from its App Store if Parler doesn't lay out a plan to moderate its content. Apple cited concerns over threats of violence and inadequate content moderation on the service. Right. So, Apple, like Google, this amazing platform that everybody loves. Apple is different. Apple is not like any other big tech company. But they're doing the exact same thing as Google. Regarding privacy, regarding free speech, regarding censorship, regarding everything. They're not different. You can have Apple products if you want to, if you like them. That's up to you. But don't pretend that they are some sort of, beacon of democracy and freedom. And, they're not. They are the exact publicly traded corporation as anyone else. And they are the most valuable company in the United States while abusing child labor from Congo and every other country in the third world that they get their resources from. So fuck Apple, right? If Apple, just suspends someone's app and they say, hey, you need to improve your moderation because there is some sort of content that we don't allow on apps that are being promoted or being, advertised on our platform, on Apple App Store. Okay, what is Parler supposed to do? I agree that Parler could ramp up its moderation. They could improve the content that they allow or disallow. They could definitely do something against the inciting of violence or any hate speech or something like that is happening on the platform, or some sort of harassment and stuff that is illegal. But it's never gonna be perfect. So what I want to know is, where is the threshold? Is Apple saying here, we see that your app, Parler, is much worse at moderating illicit or illegal content than platforms like Twitter or Facebook, and we need you to match the standards that are in other platforms so that we can allow yours to exist on our App Store as well. That is not what Apple is saying. Apple is giving them a vague ultimatum that Parler will probably not meet, and then they are gone forever. Because what is Apple specifically requiring Parler to do? It is not specified. So, Discord, says it has banned server The Donald per journalist Casey Newton. Beautiful. Beautiful. Pinterest has been limiting hashtags related to pro-Trump topics such as Stop the Steal since around November election, a spokesperson said. Banning pro-Trump hashtags. Is being pro-Trump violent? That's what I'm asking. Trump is a piece of shit, No doubt about that. But is everybody who's supporting a piece of shit violent person? That's what I would like to know. Because there's a lot of pieces of shit in the world. And are we supposed to, ban and punish everybody who has ever supported a piece of shit? This is not about Trump anymore. This was never actually about Trump. This was actually about manifesting this power that these corporations have over the discourse because they are so dominant. And what they want to do is they want to turn everything into a Disneyland. They want everything to be family friendly, advertiser friendly. They want everything to be, on the same level. There's no controversies. Everything is super commercial. There is a lot of advertiser interest. There's a lot of consumerism. There's product reviews every time. And there is Mr. Beast giving $100 gazillion to poor kids in Africa, and it makes $100 trillion more than that. This is what they want. They don't want people to have discourse about important issues. Like, hey, maybe we want to have better pay in the corporations that we work for. Maybe we want to have some better social security. Maybe we want to have some better health insurance. Maybe we want to have some sort of issues with how corporations are buying off our politicians. No, they don't want any of that. What they want is just puppies and rainbows. That's what this is about. So this is never going to stay with Trump and Trump supporters. This is going to expand into everyone, into turning the whole, internet space into just a gigantic corporate commercial advertiser-friendly space. That is where we are living. The trending page on YouTube is a perfect example. Amazon Web Services cloud unit has ceased providing Parler with cloud services. So that's what I was talking about at the very beginning. That Amazon is shutting down the servers that Parler was using to provide its service to Parler users. So now Parler is basically shut down. You cannot go to Parler, you cannot use Parler because Amazon decided, well, no more, we shut you down. So what can Parler do? Well, Parler can find another cloud provider, unlikely in this case because the other ones are Google and Microsoft, and they're definitely not going to offer Parler in their space. They can find some smaller ones, but they are never going to be as good as these big ones are because they're not going to have such a reach. Or they could just build their own servers, which is going to be super expensive, which is going to be extremely difficult, and even then they could still be throttled because then you have internet service providers that can decide not to communicate with Parler servers. So this is basically like the death penalty for the entire platform. Stripe will no longer process payments for President Trump's campaign, which continued to fundraise. So I don't care about Trump. I don't care what happens to him, to his campaign, and to anyone, in the higher echelon around him. I don't care about these people. But, if this happened, these fundraising campaigns, they are important in today's day and age, unfortunately. If politicians are not able to raise money, or candidates are not able to raise money, they are not able to compete. they're not able to, make their voices heard and, earn votes. Unfortunately, you need to have money if you want to run a campaign in any sort of, at any level. Local, statewide, federal, doesn't matter. So that's something like, what if this happens to many more candidates in the future? What if they say that, oh, well, AOC, for example, is not allowed to fundraise because the radical left is coming. They're radical, they're violent, the Antifa is supporting AOC or whatever. They can say that about anyone. When you're going, when it's this fundamental, when you're not allowed to make payments, when you're not allowed to receive payments, what can you do? There's nothing you can do. You are done. So please, somebody tell me, what the hell is actually going on here? Because, of course, what happened at the Capitol, that shouldn't have happened. And, all of these people that broke the law, they should be prosecuted. I think we should really, separate individuals that are causing trouble from those that aren't. I think that should be an ideal approach. But when we are coming after entire spectrum of people, when we are coming after entire platforms, your app is not allowed to exist. Your whole platform of hundreds of thousands of users is not allowed to exist. When it's completely legal, or, for the most part, for the vast majority, it's legal. What are we saying here? The only solution to this, because there are many people trying to suggest any solutions. There are people that are saying we need to break up these corporations and that will solve the problem. If we break them up, we will not have this problem of them controlling the discourse. Well, what will happen if we break up Facebook and there is a separate Facebook company, separate Instagram company, and separate WhatsApp? And nothing changes. There is still only one Facebook, there is still only one Instagram, and there is still only one WhatsApp. And they will always have the dominant power in their respective markets. Because Instagram is marketed somewhat differently than Facebook, and that is marketed somewhat differently than WhatsApp. What if we regulate them as public utilities? That's what some people suggest that we should do. Well, what if that happens? Well, okay, you want to regulate Facebook as a public utility or YouTube as a public utility. Well, how do you deal with spam? How do you institute the First Amendment into the algorithm? How do you decide which person gets more views than the other? How do because the algorithm is the problem here. People think that if they say, oh, this is easy, just regulate social media platforms as public utilities. This means that every speech that's on those platforms is just as if it was on any public forum. So you're allowed to say whatever you want and they cannot shut you down. Right, but the algorithm is everything. The algorithm decides who gets to see what. So how do you actually institute that into the algorithm? Because there is no such thing as a free speech, really. It's just speech, and we decide what is and what isn't allowed. So we don't allow, for example, death threats, or just false alarms like bomb or screaming bomb in a theater or fire, and there's no fire or something like that. So there is no such thing as a free speech. Like in reality, it's just a construct that we made. Like, oh, you're free to speak. But algorithms don't think in such a nuanced way. So, how do you decide that Mr. Beast gets, 1 billion views every month, but Techlore gets 100,000 views a month? How do you make that decision? And then you have the problem with spammers and trolls. You should be allowed to troll, right? But there is the thing that if there is too many trolls, it becomes raid. And what if there are trolls that raid somebody's YouTube comment section? Or what if there are, people that are deciding that they will make videos on somebody they're extremely personal. They're calling them whatever, within the legal framework, right? But, it's just slightly emotionally harassing or, uncomfortable. You should be allowed to do that under the free speech, under the First Amendment. There's no such thing as, emotionally harassing a politician, because, they should be able to take it. You should not go to prison because you say a bad thing about a politician. You should not, slander. You should not libel. You should not, say that somebody committed a crime and they didn't, unless you have evidence for that. You can go very, very far in what you can say under the freedom of speech, under the First Amendment, about other people, and that can hurt them a lot. At which point does it become illegal? At which point is that a targeted harassment that is not protected under freedom of speech? At which point is that stalking, which is not protected under freedom of speech? And at which point is it completely legal and legitimate? These are things that are impossible to technologically hard code into any algorithm. You cannot, mandate government to say what people are and aren't allowed to disseminate on their own platforms. It's your own private space. There is no cloud, there is only other people's computers. So when you're going to somebody's website, you're actually going into their living room. You're going into their private space. So it's their right to make the terms of service and enact that terms of service. If I break YouTube terms of service, I should suffer the consequences. And I think this is perfectly fine. The problem is that when I don't want to go to YouTube and I want to upload my video somewhere else, suddenly I almost don't exist and I don't reach the audience. Why? Because users aren't allowed to connect to YouTube without Google's permission. So what I'm saying here is that YouTube is proprietary. If it wasn't, you would be allowed to use another app like NewPipe, create an account that is outside of Google, and upload content that YouTube users can view. It would be a federated systems. In a federated systems, you would have a lot of apps that are each communicating to different servers. They have different user bases, but all of them can interact with each other. It's like if you were able to send direct messages from Instagram to WhatsApp, or from WhatsApp to Signal, or from Signal to TikTok, and from each of these apps to each other. That's what I'm talking about. It's not like an unrealistic concept. It's completely reasonable within the technological capabilities that we already have. There is the Matrix protocol that is built to bridge securely all of the messaging platforms that are out there. And it's already functioning. The only thing is that these platforms are not adapting it. And they are not adapting it because they are proprietary. And Matrix is fundamentally free and open source. We are playing in an unfair game. It's the rules are rigged against the freedom of users to choose because of the proprietary restrictions. These proprietary restrictions, they're not something that's like a natural law or something. These are completely fabricated. These are expansions that have been lobbied for by companies like Disney and record labels and media corporations that have benefited from expansion of copyright into to be more broad and vague and more restrictive to others. But we should go back. We should go back a couple of decades and make sure that software is actually not proprietary anymore. That users are allowed to connect to services, to connect to other people on the internet without the permission of the platforms that they are hosting their user content for. This is the real solution. Open source tech, open source software. If you want to have like a really good slogan, that's what I'm trying to do here. Open source big tech. I'm saying open source all tech. We shouldn't have few proprietary monopolies controlling their entire markets. They already have the network effect. They are already the first, and they will be the first, with or without proprietary software. The issue is that because they are proprietary, they get to decide who is allowed to access the content generated by other users. Because YouTube does not own my content, I do. YouTube is just mediating my content to other users. So what I want to do is that I want to be able to communicate with other YouTube users without YouTube's permission. I want to be able to disseminate my content to YouTube users without YouTube's permission, but YouTube doesn't allow me. I have to submit to YouTube's conditions. And that is the problem. Everybody has to submit to the monopoly power. If we don't address this, we will never escape this problem. And I'm not saying there should not be terms of service. I think there should. I think that companies are allowed to have their terms of service. I think anyone should be allowed to have whatever conditions that they want to have to accept other people on their computers. We should not mandate government to tell people what they can and can't do with their own property. But I think that we should not have the government artificially propping up monopolies by giving them unfair and unjust legal protections in form of proprietary software, in form of copyright and patent laws. That is unjust. That is unfair. It is limiting everybody's freedom. And my biggest stipulation with this is that absolutely nobody in the mainstream is talking about this way. Absolutely no one on the political spectrum, left and right, libertarian, authoritative, they are not talking about open source software at all. At all. So where are we? Where is the community of where is the free software movement? Where is everyone? Nobody is pushing for this. We see the problem, we address the problem, we find solutions, we work hard, we have all of these open source developers busting their asses, making sure that there is always an alternative to everything. But then nothing happens because the legal framework is always unfair. What are we doing? We are always going to lose this game. We need to make open source a political talking point. There is no way around this. And this is not left versus right, libertarian versus authoritarian. Well, maybe it is libertarian versus authoritarian, but it's definitely not left versus right. This is universally for everybody. Everybody benefits from open source. And I really think I'm the only one that actually is addressing this as a political issue. We need to have a political force to make sure that our movement actually keeps making some steps forward. We should not be some sort of fringe group or some sort of echo chamber of just, enthusiasts of free technology or whatever, some hippies or something. No, we should be the mainstream. We should be part of the discussion, but we are not. We are immediately dismissed. So this is what I wanted to say about this. This is a long rant. I've been walking throughout this room as I was talking to a microphone. So I hope that you enjoy this format in a more different way. And please join the conversation, join the discussion. I'm reading your comments and I'm thinking about it. I'm taking notes, and I wanna improve my argumentation for this because I wanna make sure that we can push this forward and we can talk to other members of the open source and privacy community, because privacy doesn't matter on its own. We don't care about privacy for the sake of privacy. We care about privacy because there is a hierarchy, and as long as there are people above us, they are able to abuse the information that they get to know about us. So that's why we care about privacy. But open source is our fundamental defense tool against all of the problems that we are facing from members in the higher up in the hierarchy. So all of the corporations and all of the extremely successful and rich individuals who are able to who have more power and influence than any of us. We cannot win this game unless open source becomes the new legal norm. That is what we need to push the hardest.